It was a chilly autumn evening when it all began, though at the time, I didn't know it yet. My wife, Vanessa, had always been an ambitious woman, the kind who could walk into a room and command respect without saying a word. She was a manager at a mid-sized tech company, a leader, a problem solver. I admired her drive. Or maybe I just wanted to believe I had someone extraordinary by my side. That night, she came home later than usual, claiming there was some emergency meeting that had kept her tied up at the office. I didn't think much of it at first. Managers get busy, I told myself. Deadlines, last-minute changes, demanding clients. It all came with the territory. But something about the way she avoided my eyes, the rushed tone in her voice, made my chest tighten. I shook it off. No sense in being paranoid. As the days turned into weeks, the late nights became more frequent. She started dressing sharper, more polished than I'd ever seen her. Expensive new outfits appeared in her closet, the kind she usually scoffed at as unnecessary splurges. I joked about it one morning while she was heading out the door, saying, "Promotion coming soon? You're dressing like you run the whole company now." She laughed, but it felt hollow. "Just trying to keep up appearances," she replied, kissing me on the cheek before leaving. The scent of her new perfume lingered long after the door closed. It was subtle, sophisticated, and unfamiliar. Like the woman wearing it wasn't the same Vanessa I'd known for the past 8 years. I wanted to ignore the whispers in my mind, the nagging voice that kept asking questions I didn't want to answer. But then, the rumors started. One evening, a close friend of mine, Eric, called me out of the blue. He worked in the same industry as Vanessa and often rubbed shoulders with people from her company at networking events. "Hey, I don't know if I should even bring this up," Eric began hesitantly, "but I overheard something at a happy hour. It's probably nothing, but people are talking about Vanessa." "What do you mean, talking?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Eric sighed. "Look, I don't want to jump to conclusions. Some people were saying she's been getting close to a guy at work. One of her employees, apparently." I laughed nervously. "Close how? Like mentoring him?" "That's the thing," Eric said carefully. "It didn't sound like mentoring." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt around me. I wanted to hang up, dismiss it as idle gossip from people with too much time on their hands. But something in Eric's voice told me he wasn't calling to stir the pot. He was worried. And so was I. "Thanks for telling me," I said finally. I'll figure it out." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing in particular. My mind raced with questions. Who was this guy? Was there even a guy? Was this just office gossip blown out of proportion? I tried to convince myself it was all a misunderstanding, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the cracks in our marriage were wider than I'd realized. The doubts were no longer whispers. They were loud, demanding to be addressed, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. Once the seed of doubt was planted, it grew like a weed, taking root in every interaction I had with Vanessa. Little things that I might have brushed off before now felt loaded with meaning. She'd always been a little guarded with her phone, but lately, it never left her hand. If I walked into a room, she'd lock the screen without thinking. When I asked her about her day, her answers were shorter than usual, devoid of the little anecdotes she used to share about work drama or office banter. I tried not to let it consume me. I told myself I was being irrational, that I needed to trust her. But trust doesn't thrive in the shadow of suspicion. A few days after Eric's call, Vanessa came home later than ever. I was sitting on the couch when she walked in, her face glowing from the cold night air, or maybe something else. Her hair was still neatly done, her makeup perfect, not a single trace of the exhaustion you'd expect after a long day at work. "Sorry I'm late," she said, hanging her coat by the door. "It's been a crazy day. We're preparing for a huge project rollout, and everything's a mess." "Yeah? What kind of project?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated, just for a second. It was barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Oh, just some internal systems upgrade," she said quickly, moving toward the kitchen. Her tone was light, dismissive, but her body language told a different story. She didn't stop to talk to me like she usually did. Instead, she busied herself with something at the sink, her back turned. I could see her shoulders tense as she washed an already clean glass. I decided to let it go for now. But later that night, when she was asleep, I found myself staring at her phone on the nightstand. It was charging, face down, the screen dark. For a moment, I debated whether to pick it up. My heart was pounding, my palms damp with sweat. I knew it was wrong, but the pull was stronger than my moral compass. I grabbed it, hoping against hope that I wouldn't find anything. But of course, it was locked. Her usual passcode didn't work. She'd changed it. My stomach dropped. The next morning, I casually brought it up over breakfast. "Hey, I tried to check the weather on your phone last night, but the passcode didn't work. Did you change it?" Vanessa looked up from her coffee, her expression perfectly neutral. "Oh yeah. IT said we should all update our passwords at work, and I figured I'd do it for everything." She was lying. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. Vanessa wasn't the type to suddenly tighten her security, especially when I'd always had access to her phone before. "Can you tell me the new one?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She hesitated just long enough to make it awkward. "Sure," she said finally, rattling off a string of numbers. I smiled, pretending not to notice the crack in her armor. But as I took a sip of my coffee, I realized something. She hadn't offered to unlock it for me. Later that week, I decided to take matters into my own hands. If there was something to find, I wasn't going to wait for it to fall into my lap. I remembered Eric's words about a younger guy at her office and figured it wouldn't hurt to dig a little. I didn't want to snoop. I hated myself for even thinking about it, but the need for answers outweighed my guilt. I started small. I checked her social media. Vanessa rarely posted anything personal, but her work colleagues were a different story. I scrolled through her company's LinkedIn page, looking at team photos, posts from corporate events, anything that might give me a clue. And then I found him. His name was Ryan, and he was young, mid-20s at most. He had the kind of easy charm that came with youth and ambition. In every group photo, he was standing just a little closer to Vanessa than anyone else. One photo, in particular, caught my eye. It was from a company happy hour at a local bar. Vanessa was laughing, a drink in her hand, while Ryan leaned in to whisper something in her ear. The look on her face, open, warm, like he was the only person in the room, made my chest ache. I showed the photo to Eric the next time we met for drinks. "That's him," Eric said grimly. "That's the guy I heard people talking about." My hands clenched around the glass. "What else did you hear?" Eric hesitated, then sighed. "Look, I don't want to make things worse, but there's been talk about how close they've gotten. People have seen them having lunch together, leaving the office at the same time. Stuff like that. Stuff like that," I repeated bitterly. Eric put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, man. I really hope I'm wrong." But I knew he wasn't. After my talk with Eric, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living on borrowed time. The Vanessa I knew, the Vanessa I loved, was slipping away, and all I could do was watch as the distance between us grew wider. I needed proof, something undeniable that would either confirm or, hopefully, put my suspicions to rest. One night, as Vanessa sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I decided to test her. "Hey, how about we go out this weekend? Just the two of us. It's been a while since we've had a date night." She barely glanced up. "I'll have to check my schedule," she said absently, her thumbs swiping across the screen. "Check your schedule?" I repeated, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Vanessa, it's not like I'm asking you to plan a wedding. It's just dinner." That got her attention. She looked up, her brow furrowing. "I didn't mean it like that," she said, her tone defensive. "It's just a busy time at work right now. I've got a lot on my plate." "Work. It was always about work, right?" I said, forcing a smile. "I get it. Let me know." But she never did. The following Saturday, she told me she had to go into the office for a few hours to prepare for an upcoming presentation. She kissed me goodbye, promised she wouldn't be long, and left. I stood by the window, watching as her car disappeared down the street, a sick feeling churning in my stomach. I waited an hour before grabbing my keys and heading out. If she was really at work, I'd let it go. But if she wasn't, the drive to her office felt like an eternity. My palms were slick against the steering wheel, my heart racing as I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. Her car wasn't there. I sat in my car, staring at the building as anger and fear warred inside me. She could have parked somewhere else. Maybe she carpooled with a coworker. There had to be an explanation, didn't there? As I wrestled with my thoughts, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Eric. Just saw Vanessa at the cafe on 7th. She's not alone. My stomach dropped. I texted back, asking if he was sure, but I already knew the answer. Positive, Eric replied. She's with that guy, Ryan. They're sitting in the corner. Looks cozy. Cozy. That word felt like a punch to the gut. I drove straight to the cafe, my hands trembling on the wheel. I parked down the street, far enough away that I wouldn't be seen, and walked toward the glass-fronted building. My breath caught as I spotted them through the window. Vanessa was sitting across from Ryan, her head tilted as she laughed at something he said. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, and she didn't pull away. I wanted to storm in, to demand answers, to shatter the illusion they were so comfortably living in. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. It wasn't just about catching her in the act. It was about preparing myself for what came next. I didn't say anything that night. Vanessa came home as if nothing had happened, her face flushed with the chill of the evening. She kissed me on the cheek, asking about my day, as though she hadn't just spent hours with another man. I played along, keeping my tone light, my expression neutral. But inside, I was a storm, my thoughts racing with anger and betrayal. The next morning, I woke early, sitting at the kitchen table with the photo I'd taken displayed on my phone. When Vanessa finally came downstairs, she paused in the doorway, her smile faltering when she saw my expression. "Morning," she said cautiously. I didn't reply. I just slid the phone across the table toward her. "What's this?" she asked, frowning as she picked it up. "You tell me," I said, my voice low and steady. Her face went pale as she looked at the photo. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she let out a shaky laugh, setting the phone down. "Are you spying on me now? Really, Mark? This is ridiculous." "Ridiculous?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "You're sitting in a cafe, holding hands with another man, and I'm the ridiculous one?" "It's not what it looks like," she said quickly, her tone defensive. "Ryan's a coworker. We were just going over some ideas for the project." "Don't insult my intelligence, Vanessa," I snapped. "I'm not blind. I see what's happening. Eric told me everything." She froze, her eyes narrowing. "Eric? What's he been saying?" "That you've been spending a lot of time with Ryan," I said coldly. "That people at work are starting to talk. And now I see why." Vanessa crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "I can't believe you're listening to gossip. Do you have any idea how stressful my job is? I don't have time for this nonsense." "Nonsense?" I shot back. "Vanessa, I saw you. I have proof. So stop lying to me." The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I thought she might come clean, that she'd admit the truth and we could figure out where to go from here. But instead, she shook her head, her face a mask of indifference. "Believe what you want," she said quietly. "I don't have to justify myself to you." And with that, she walked out, leaving me sitting there with nothing but the photo and the gnawing realization that our marriage was crumbling before my eyes. After Vanessa walked out of the kitchen, the house felt suffocatingly quiet. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the empty chair where she had been, the photo still displayed on my phone. My mind raced with questions. Was she too ashamed to admit the truth? Or did she genuinely believe she could gaslight me into doubting what I'd seen? But one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be resolved with a simple confrontation. Vanessa had made her choice, and if she wasn't ready to face the consequences, I'd have to bring them to her. The next few days passed in a tense stalemate. She was distant but polite, acting as if nothing had happened. She'd leave early for work, come home late, and barely say 2 words to me. I played my part, keeping the peace while quietly piecing things together. The trust was gone, replaced by a relentless need to know everything. I started noticing patterns I hadn't paid attention to before. The way her phone seemed to buzz constantly, but she never answered it in front of me. The way she avoided making plans with me, always citing work, as her excuse. It was exhausting, trying to maintain the facade of normalcy while my world was unraveling beneath me. One night, as I lay awake in bed, listening to her steady breathing beside me, I made a decision. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. The next morning, after Vanessa left for work, I began my search. I started with her laptop. It was risky, she kept it password protected, but I'd seen her type the code enough times to memorize it. My hands trembled as I opened her email, half hoping I wouldn't find anything. At first, everything seemed normal. Work emails, promotional junk, the usual clutter. But then I noticed a separate folder, tucked away near the bottom of the list. Personal. I hesitated for a moment before clicking it. Inside were dozens of emails between Vanessa and Ryan. Some were innocent enough, discussions about projects, meeting schedules, but others were different. One message in particular made my blood run cold. "Last night was amazing," Ryan had written. "I can't stop thinking about you." Vanessa's reply was just as damning. "Me too. I wish we didn't have to be so careful, but it's worth it." I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding in my chest. There it was, the proof I'd been dreading. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or some innocent workplace friendship. It was an affair. Over the next few days, I watched Vanessa more closely than ever, looking for cracks in her carefully constructed lies. She was good, too good. But now that I knew the truth, I could see the signs. The stolen glances at her phone, the way she seemed to brighten whenever she mentioned work, the occasional slip of a smile when she thought I wasn't looking. I kept my distance, biding my time. Confronting her again would be pointless without a plan. I needed to think ahead, to stay calm, to act strategically. One evening, while she was in the shower, I noticed her phone sitting unattended on the bathroom counter. My heart raced as I picked it up, praying she hadn't changed the password again. She hadn't. I scrolled through her messages, finding exactly what I expected. A string of texts with Ryan. "Ryan, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same time?" "Vanessa, yes. And don't forget to delete these messages." The arrogance of it made my blood boil. She was so confident I wouldn't catch on, so sure she could hide her betrayal behind a screen. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to my own phone before putting hers back where I found it. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of relief. The more proof I had, the harder it would be for her to deny what she'd done. The next day, I called Eric. I hated dragging him further into this mess, but I needed someone to talk to. Someone who wasn't emotionally tied to Vanessa or the situation. "I found proof," I said bluntly, skipping the pleasantries. Eric didn't sound surprised. "What kind of proof?" "Emails. Texts. They've been meeting in secret, and it's more than just lunch breaks." There was a pause. Then Eric said, "I'm sorry, Mark. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." "Thanks," I said, my voice hollow. I don't know what to do next." "You need to think about yourself," Eric said firmly. "Vanessa's made her choices. You can't change that, but you can decide how you respond. Don't let her control the narrative." His words stuck with me long after we hung up. He was right. Vanessa had spent months lying to me, deceiving me, but that didn't mean I had to be her victim. That evening, I sat down with a notebook and started writing. If Vanessa thought she could keep me in the dark while she built a new life with Ryan, she was sorely mistaken. The first step was securing my finances. I logged into our shared accounts, noting every transaction, every transfer. Vanessa's spending had increased over the past few months: expensive lunches, boutique shopping trips, hotel stays. It was all there, laid out in black and white. Next, I reached out to a lawyer. I wanted to know my options, to make sure I wasn't blindsided if Vanessa decided to make the first move. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Claire, listened carefully as I explained the situation. "You've already done a lot of the work," she said after I showed her the evidence I'd gathered. "If this goes to court, the affair will work in your favor. But you need to be prepared for a fight. People like Vanessa don't go down quietly." Her words gave me a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about protecting myself, it was about taking back control of my life. The tension in the house was unbearable. Every interaction with Vanessa felt like a game of chess, each of us carefully maneuvering, neither willing to tip our hand. But I had already decided. This facade couldn't last much longer. It was a Friday evening when everything finally came to a head. Vanessa came home late again, her face glowing as if she'd just stepped out of a romantic comedy. She set her bag down and poured herself a glass of wine, humming softly to herself. "Busy day?" I asked, leaning against the counter, my tone neutral. She nodded, not even looking at me. "Exhausting. I'm starving. Did you eat already?" "I waited for you," I said, my eyes fixed on her. She froze for a moment, her glass halfway to her lips. "Oh, well, I didn't expect that. You should have eaten." I took a step closer, folding my arms. "I've been waiting for a lot of things, Vanessa. For you to be honest, for one." Her head snapped up, and for the first time in weeks, I saw real fear in her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of screenshots, emails, and photos I'd gathered. I placed it on the counter in front of her, the screen glowing like a beacon of truth. "Go ahead," I said, my voice cold. "Explain this." Vanessa's face drained of color. She didn't reach for the phone, didn't even look at it. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met my gaze, her expression hardening into defiance. "I don't need to explain myself to you," she said quietly. "Don't you?" I asked, my voice rising. "After everything we've been through, after the life we built together, you don't think I deserve an explanation?" She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You don't understand. You've been so checked out, so focused on your own life. You didn't even notice when things started falling apart." "Checked out," I repeated, incredulous. "You think that justifies sneaking around behind my back? You could have talked to me, Vanessa. You could have been honest." Her eyes flashed with anger. "Honest? You wouldn't have listened. You never listen. Ryan, he listens. He sees me." My chest tightened at the mention of his name, but I refused to let her see how much it hurt. "Ryan sees you," I said flatly. "And what about me, Vanessa? The man who stood by you, supported you, trusted you? Did that mean nothing to you?" For a moment, she looked like she might cry. But then her mask slipped back into place, and she crossed her arms. "Maybe I was tired of waiting for you to see me." I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. "This isn't about me, Vanessa. This is about you and the choices you made. And now, you're going to have to face the consequences." She laughed bitterly. "Consequences? What are you going to do, Mark? Ruin me? Go ahead. I don't care anymore." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my composure. I wasn't going to let her bait me. "You already ruined yourself," I said quietly. "And when this is over, you're going to realize just how much you've lost." With that, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. That weekend, I put my plan into motion. I moved half of our savings into a separate account, ensuring Vanessa couldn't drain it once she realized I wasn't backing down. I also filed the necessary paperwork with Claire, my lawyer, to initiate divorce proceedings. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and preparations. Vanessa tried to act normal, as if nothing had changed, but I could feel the tension radiating off her every time we were in the same room. One evening, she finally confronted me. "What are you doing, Mark?" she demanded, her voice tight with anger. "Why are you being so vindictive?" "Vindictive?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You think this is vindictive? You cheated on me, Vanessa. You lied to me for months, and now you're playing the victim?" Her jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought she might apologize. But instead, she crossed her arms and said, "Fine. If this is how you want to play it, then let's see who comes out on top." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Vanessa wasn't going to go quietly, and I knew the battle ahead would be brutal. In the weeks following the divorce, Vanessa's behavior became erratic. She tried to reach out to me, calling late at night, leaving tearful voicemails, and even showing up at the house unannounced. But I didn't engage. My silence was the most powerful weapon I had. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Through one of our mutual acquaintances, I learned that Ryan, her golden boy, had moved on. Apparently, he'd found someone else, someone closer to his age, and left Vanessa without so much as a goodbye. When she showed up at my door one rainy evening, soaked and desperate, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What do you want, Vanessa?" She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands wringing nervously. I made a mistake," she whispered. "I thought I knew what I wanted, but I didn't. I was wrong, Mark. About everything." I crossed my arms, keeping my expression cold. "And now you expect me to forgive you?" She flinched. "No, I don't expect anything. I wanted to say I'm sorry." For a moment, I let her words hang in the air. Then I sighed, my tone calm but firm. "Vanessa, I spent months wondering what I did wrong, blaming myself for your choices. But now I see it clearly. This wasn't about me. It was about you. Your selfishness, your need for attention, your inability to appreciate what you had. I gave you everything, and you threw it away." Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw the weight of her mistakes truly sink in. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know," she said quietly. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long moment, searching for the anger I had felt for so long. But it wasn't there anymore. All that remained was a quiet resolve. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Vanessa," I said finally. "But it won't be with me." And with that, I turned and went back inside, locking the door behind me. It didn't take long for word to spread. Vanessa, true to form, couldn't resist controlling the narrative. She started telling friends and colleagues that I was the one who had driven her away, painting herself as the long-suffering wife who'd finally had enough. But I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. With Claire's help, I made sure the truth came out. The emails, the texts, the photos, everything was laid bare. Our mutual friends were stunned. Some took her side, refusing to believe she could do something so cold. But others reached out to me, offering their support and sharing stories of their own encounters with Vanessa's manipulations. The cracks in her armor were growing, and for the first time, I felt like I was regaining control. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Vanessa's lawyer tried to paint me as controlling and distant, claiming that her affair was a symptom of a failing marriage, not the cause. But Claire was relentless, countering every argument with evidence we had painstakingly gathered. The photos, the texts, the emails, they painted a damning picture of Vanessa's betrayal. Her attempts to play the victim fell apart as the court saw the truth for what it was: premeditated deceit. Vanessa's confidence began to falter. Each session chipped away at her carefully crafted facade. By the time we reached the financial discussions, she was visibly shaken. She hadn't expected me to fight back so effectively, to call her out so thoroughly. When the ruling came, it was clear the judge wasn't sympathetic to her actions. I was awarded the house, the majority of our savings, and custody of the narrative. Vanessa was left with the fallout, a reputation in shreds, and a life she had gambled away. But I wasn't done yet. Months passed, and I found myself rebuilding the life I thought Vanessa had destroyed. It wasn't easy. Trust doesn't come back quickly, and the scars of betrayal don't fade overnight. But with time, I learned to let go of the pain, to find joy in the small things, to imagine a future unburdened by the past. As for Vanessa, I heard through the grapevine that she left her job shortly after the divorce. Her name still came up in whispers at networking events, but it was always accompanied by a tinge of pity. She'd gambled everything and lost, and now she was just another cautionary tale. In the end, I realized something important. Revenge isn't about destroying the other person. It's about reclaiming your own power. And as I stood on my porch one quiet evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time.